So, how do you interview someone who literally wrote the book on strategy? I'm talking about Alex M.H. Smith, author of No Bullshit Strategy. How the heck do you interview someone like that? Well, I didn't want to sit down, nod along, and be the students. I didn't want to just ask him questions about his book. I did something else. So I threw him curveballs, 3 curveballs to be exact. One about my life, losing 27 kilos and defeating chronic hand eczema period of my life. Did I have a strategy, or did the stars just align perfectly? Second, one of my all-time favorite movies, Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill in Moneyball, about a film about a baseball team called the Oakland A's, how they achieved so much more with a fraction of the budget compared to the other teams. The other one, we look at a fictional company, a case study that relates to some of the work I do in the security industry. So, some of the big takeaways. Agency, how important agency is when it comes to strategy. A lot of founders, a lot of leaders might not be stuck because they don't know what to do. They might be completely stuck because they don't take an option, because there's no agency to change, to move. The other one, an Arnold goal. Yes, I'm talking Arnold Schwarzenegger. Having a big, audacious, bombastic Arnold goal can blast us past all the other checkpoints that would have taken us otherwise years to do. So going from a world famous bodybuilder to an actor to a governor, right? And the other one was sometimes you need to channel your inner dictator. And we speak about why asking your team for input on the strategy can maybe be the worst things that you do. Sometimes you need to play the card, I'm the boss, this is what we're going to do, and I live and die by the consequences. Ladies and gents, enjoy Alex M.H. Smith.
The vast majority of businesses out there have just got no strategy at all. It's not like they're employing bad strategies. There's just a hole in their head where strategies should be.
The best strategies come from the bottom up, not the top down.
God, hate it. Biggest fiction in the whole fucking industry.
Alex, this case is about personal transformation, overcoming challenges. Listen to the case, and then let's use your strategic thinking brain to reflect on what the heck happened. So 2022, I weighed upping 115 kilos and was clinically obese. Then came a tipping point. I developed chronic hand eczema, a debilitating disease. Every handshake, pain. So I developed priorities.
There are some interesting universal strategy parallels there, which are
Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can.
Alex, welcome to this very exclusive corner of chaos. This is the Coach Me If You Can show. Would you mind telling us, what do you do? Why do you do it?
if I want to bore people at a dinner party, I can say that I am a strategy consultant. And then the first thing everyone says is, what do you mean strategy? And already you're on the back foot, and it tells you everything you need to know about the problem with the strategy industry and the problem that I'm trying to solve, which is that business strategy is a real thing. And there's like lots of very good literature out there about it. But for various reasons, it doesn't actually filter in. It doesn't trickle through into the brain of 99% of founders, CEOs, or the people who actually need this stuff, desperately need this stuff. And that's why the vast majority of businesses out there have just got no strategy at all. It's not like they're employing bad strategies. There's just a hole in their head where strategies should be. And through much more kind of luck than judgment, I've found myself in a place where I am this kind of democratizing voice of strategy and putting it across in a way that makes it a lot more accessible to a lot more people than the traditional sort of Harvard Business Review, McKinsey type articulations, which have been the cornerstone of the industry. And so now I have this kind of big vision of like universalizing these principles, which, like I say, I think absolutely everybody running a business, it's the foundation of their whole job, making a decision which is going to result in the business growing rather than the business failing. I mean, that's pretty fundamental. And there is actually a technique to doing this. And I want every single founder on the planet to at least grasp the basics of that technique. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
Nice. And why'd you do it?
For that reason, that this is obviously, if you implant this knowledge into people's heads, clearly their businesses are going to work better. But actually, even on a more macro level, there's a potential to create just an explosion of value in the world, because the crux of good business strategy is the creation of new value, putting new value out there into the world that didn't exist before. If you do that, that business is going to earn a lot of money. But suffice it to say, the vast majority of businesses do not produce new value. What they do is they double, triple, quadruple, quintuple up on value that is already very, very well catered for. And what they're fundamentally doing really is they're actually diluting the market in a kind of parasitical fashion. They aren't actually adding to it. So there is actually, if you want to get sort of like purposeful about it, there is a kind of social benefit, so to speak, to businesses being more strategic, because they don't all just end up doing this grinding, commodifying, Me Too kind of process. But that is the very grandiose version of my theory. In the short term, I'm happy for people to just give me money to just learn strategy.
How did you get into this line of work?
Well, I was this sort of, my whole sort of USP, if you like, was being a completely untrained and ignorant strategy consultant. So this is without exaggeration, I became a sort of like a classic sort of solo consultant type model, solo strategy consultant, without ever having read a single book about strategy or ever having worked in a single organization that did strategy. In hindsight, it was very stupid, but at the time I didn't know any different. I basically just kind of made up these theories from my old job, which was in agency land, where I was looking at like some clients that you get. If you think about an agency, right? Agency, their job is to put lipstick on the pig. So companies come to you and they basically say, how can you convince people to buy this shit thing that we're selling? And then
Window dressing.
You have to sort of spin it to make it seem viable. And what I sort of noticed when I was doing that is I was like, isn't it funny how like some of these companies you have to do a lot of like creative jiggery pokery to sell, and other ones you actually sort of don't, because the thing they're selling is already just kind of great in the first place, and there isn't really any way that we can kind of gild the lily because the lily is already gilded. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if you could kind of make most of our clients into those kind of clients? All I'm describing here basically is just like companies with good versus bad strategy, but I didn't have that language at the time. So I came up with all these like theories and sort of techniques and processes by which I thought that I could help companies do that. And then I went out there and started sort of selling this as a consultant. And I was acting almost like I had invented this new body of thought, which actually, little did I know, was just bog standard strategy, just in a different package. And it took me like 3 or 4 years of doing this as a consultant to realize that this original quote unquote stuff that I was saying was actually not original at all. Like I did a TEDx talk that was pretty successful. And one of the comments below it said, oh yeah, this is basically just blue ocean strategy. And I was like, blue ocean strategy? What's that? What are you talking about? And so this is like, for people who don't know, this is basically the #1 sort of strategy book of all time. And here was I going around saying all this stuff, and I'd never even heard of the book, let alone read it. And when I read it, I was mortified because I was like, well, shit, everyone's just going to think I was ripping off this book. And so that was pretty desolate. But then I had a second thought, which was like, okay, well, fine. None of my ideas are actually new. I guess there's nothing new under the sun. But if they're not new to me, they sure as hell aren't new to my clients. And that's why, like, this was why all this sort of basic stuff was actually news to my clients. And I was like, okay, well, there's a fundamental problem here, because frankly, I think every single founder on the planet should have read Blue Ocean Strategy. It isn't a great book judged as a piece of literature, but it's a great strategy book. But it's the fact that it's not a great book judged as a piece of literature is why people aren't reading it and why people aren't really interested in it, even though they should be. And so that's when I started to realize that there was this potential to reframe these ideas more broadly. And then obviously I wrote my book, No Bullshit Strategy, which is just, you might as well call it strategy for dummies, really. It's kind of the same concept, but trying to just like put fundamentally 90% the same ideas across in a more digestible package.
Great. And walk us through a fictional client that comes to you and says, do they come with you with problems with, this is something we're experiencing? Can you help? Or is this something we're working on a strategy? Can you come in and grill us and challenge our strategy?
Well, that question you asked is much more loaded than you think. And so I'm not going to go down the massive tangent that could take us down, which is just very briefly to say that because most people don't know what strategy is, they don't go shopping for strategy. So it's not, you don't have these millions of people out there thinking, oh, I wish we had a strategy. Let me find someone to help me with my strategy. That's part of the symptom of the disease of nobody doing strategy. So because of that, a lot of the time the way in with the client, it might not be as straightforward as, hey, I need help with my strategy, because people aren't thinking that way. But that being said, now that I've got like a big audience, obviously that has the effect of filtering down the very small numbers of companies who actually are thinking this way. And these typically what you're going to see if a company is suffering from sort of lack of strategy, you're going to see plateauing growth. You're going to see commodification. They will probably, the way that they experience it on their side will be, often they'll say that they're unclear on what makes them different, or they're unclear on really what they're offering, or they're unclear on what direction to take the business. Like they feel like they've hit a bit of a wall. That's the sort of visceral feeling of sort of absence of strategy. And so you're trying to give them that sort of clarity over, right, what does this business actually do, so that they can feel that real sense of focus. And more to the point, obviously the answer that you give, it has to be an answer which also gives the business leverage in the market. So the very simple way to think about it is just that every business exists for only one reason. And it doesn't matter whether it's like the tiniest business or the biggest business. The definition of business is just a kind of system to produce value that people will then exchange for other value, i.e. money. And clearly, the more value you can create, the more value you can produce, the more value you're going to receive. And that's how a business becomes successful. So the crux of the strategic challenge is to figure out what value are we producing, number one. But number two, just as importantly, is asterisk, this must be value people can't get from anywhere else. So what you'll see for the vast majority of businesses is that they do produce some form of value. So like, for sake of argument, like, I don't know, this is a stupid example, but like if I start a business selling socks, I can say, well, people need socks, people like socks, people buy socks. I'm therefore producing something that people want, tick. Where you fall down is the fact that people have got a million different options of where they can buy socks. So you've got no leverage. So that's why you then get into a struggle to be picked amongst all of the other sock brands. So that's why the alchemy is giving people something they want that they can't get anywhere else. So if you were the only sock company on the whole planet, you'd be like bloody Apple, wouldn't you? Like it would be you'd be earning trillions and trillions of dollars. But so that's the situation you need to create. And so every strategy project, it comes down to solving that basic riddle. How can we produce something that people want, but where we are the only people providing that? Because when you manage that, then obviously you have power in the dynamic, you have leverage, and you are able to, marketing becomes much easier. You can charge whatever you want, et cetera, because you are the only game in town. And so as you can see, it's pretty universal. It's a pretty universal game that you're playing with that.
Yeah. So thinking about value as soon as possible. Probably lots of people think I'm going to create a business to generate money for myself, income for myself. And maybe that's where it starts going wrong. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I love that you said that. You just played right into my hands there. So yeah, exactly. Because it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently, that you can think about it in these sort of stages where, as you say, most businesses are started with a selfish perspective. So like, how can I get stuff for me? And generally speaking, maybe someone's doing a job and then they think, oh, well, I could just, instead of doing this job for my boss or for a company, I could go and do this myself and I could keep all the money for myself. And so there's nothing enters their head about, does the world want you to do this? Like I can see why you want to start a business, but can you explain to me why the world would want you to start that business? And the truth is that probably the world doesn't want you to start that business because it's quite fine. We've already got enough coaches. Thank you very much. I don't really need another coach. But nonetheless, that's how you get into the game in the first place. Now, obviously, if you keep that mentality, that business is going to completely fail. So very quickly, people start to cotton on to, okay, I do need to actually I at least need to do a good job for my customers. I do need to serve my customers well. So then people sort of move to the second sort of stage of consciousness, as I think of it, which is they start focusing on doing a good job for their customers. And again, if we use the coaching example, they think like, oh, okay, right. I can't just say like, I'm a coach and then the whole world's going to come to me. I need to actually like try and give something with my business. But yeah, normally that manifests in just working hard and doing a good job and trying to be the best coach or whatever I can be. And that will give you a functional business probably, but there's no leverage. So just being a good coach, I'm sure that there are plenty of good coaches who could be listening to this and they will recognize, shit, I'm a really great coach, but why is my business still shit? And it's still shit because like you've got no leverage. You're just saying you're a good coach and maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but the market has no way of telling anyway. So it all basically just comes down to scrambling for referrals and hopping from one client to the next and all that hustle. And that's, again, the reality that most people experience as a business.
Interesting, these different things that one could focus on, the customers or the competitors. A lot of people look to what is everybody else doing, and that's maybe something we do. But I understand it's about leverage and creating value, kind of creating an unfair advantage, something it's the only thing this podcast does, for instance, that you can't get anywhere else, because Peter's putting his private life on air and getting coached by individuals to create value. The value being other people learn more about coaching. It demystifies it, kind of pulls the curtain away in that line. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Alex, we have a section, fact or fiction. Ready?
Yep.
The hardest part of strategy isn't deciding what to do, it's getting people to actually do it. Quick one from me. This episode is brought to you by InnerBuddies. InnerBuddies is a young modern company in the Netherlands. They're a spin-off from Maastricht University, and they do something rather specific and actually darn cool. So they study poop. They study the microbiome, they study the gut, and they do that through studying poop. So they studied my poo 5 times now over the last 3 years, and I must say I'm a complete convert. So since then, I've lost 30 kilos, I've beaten hand eczema, and I'm actually probably, as lots of people around you might say, a lot less irritable than I was, which is probably like a public service. So go check out the boys and girls at InnerBuddies, www.innerbuddies.com, and have a look at one of their test kits. So they send one of these test kits home to you. You go to the toilet, you put some data in the toilet, if you know what I mean. You scoop some of the data off and you mail it to them. And 4 to 6 weeks later, you get a personalized dashboard. Now, the dashboard shows you exactly what's happening on the inside. It shows your microbiome, what bacteria are thriving, which ones have gone AWOL, and how you can use nutrition and supplements to sort things out. So it's a bit clever, it's a bit strange, and it works. If you've ever wondered why your energy's low, why your skin's flaring up, why you're irritable, or why your third coffee is just not hitting right and you're running off to the toilet the whole time, your gut might be trying to tell you something, and Inner Buddies helps you listen. Go check out the boys and girls at Inner Buddies, www.innerbuddies.com, and have a look at one of their test kits and use the code WellerGuts at checkout for a small discount. Back to the show.
The hardest part of strategy isn't deciding what to do, it's getting people to actually do it.
Got to be careful because it sounds like something I might have said, so I can't refute it.
It's not from your book. It might be in your book, but I know the individual. I think you know the book as well.
Okay, cool. So right, so I can disagree with it then. Would I disagree with that though? Because it is a pretty good statement.
The hardest part of strategy isn't deciding what to do, it's getting people to actually do it.
I'm gonna give that a qualified fact. I don't know if hard is the word I would use. I might say the most important part of strategy with slight change. I don't know if it is actually necessarily the most difficult bit, but yeah, it's the strategy is riddled with these insanely obvious points, but that despite being so obvious that when you say them you sound like an idiot, people do not actually adhere to them. And this is one of them, because like you're not going to get any different results unless you do something different, right? So the main crux of whether a strategy is going to work, far, far more important than the quality of the thinking, is does it move you from doing behavior A to behavior B? And then maybe that's a stupid behavior or maybe that's a clever behavior. That is actually secondary to the fact of do you actually move? And what you mostly see with strategy is you see a bunch of nice thinking and then no actual change on the behavior level. And people are like, why didn't the strategy work? And it's like, well, you're not actually doing anything different than what you were doing before. So why would you expect anything to happen? So that on that basis, yeah, like a stupid idea that is different from what you were doing before is worth infinity X more than a brilliant idea that doesn't make you do differently than what you did before. Because a stupid idea can succeed by accident, but an idea that doesn't actually execute, it can't even succeed by accident. So what's the point? So that's why it is the most important.
So you can have a beautiful PowerPoint with a beautiful strategy, but if that doesn't trickle down to people picking up tools differently, doing something differently, understanding it, being inspired by it, the best strategy in the world is not going to get you anywhere if it doesn't inspire people to behave differently.
Yeah, and that's actually why now what I tend to do is I tend to tell people, even though you could argue this isn't really true, but it's a good mental hack, that I say like, okay, your strategy needs to generate an innovation.
The best strategy is often the simplest one.
No, I'm going to say fiction. I mean, obviously a good strategy should be simple. That is true. Strategy should be simple, but it should also be, for want of a better word, clever or surprising. Surprising is a better one. So when you say the strategy, the response that people should give you is, oh, yeah, actually, I never thought of it that way before. That's surprising. That's interesting. If you say our strategy is to listen to our customers or something, no one is going to go, oh, interesting perspective. Yeah. Like no one's going to say that because it isn't an interesting perspective. What you were saying about your podcast, for example, like podcasts about coaching, fine, whatever. I'm sure there's a million of them. Oh, but people come on and they coach me. That has a little bit of spice to it, doesn't it? It's simple, but like you hear it and you're like, well, it's like I said to you before we got on air. I was like, oh, that's clever. That's like funny idea. That is the sign of a strategy, right? So yeah, fiction.
Interesting. We have our first fiction. The best strategies come from the bottom up, not the top down.
God, hate it. Biggest fiction in the whole fucking industry. that does my head in. Well, I suppose it somewhat depends on what you mean by the bottom up, because like if they're talking about, which I assume this is talking about, it's kind of like not dictated by some authoritarian leader, but it sort of comes from the team. That's the thing that I strongly disagree with. If it's talking in a more, I don't think this is what it's saying, but just a caveat. If you're talking about like strategy is emergent from the realities of the business, that is true. That is true, right? You can't just like with your business think, what arbitrarily would I like to do, and then just kind of like force your business in that direction, because every business has got its own identity, and you actually have to kind of, you have to look at the tendencies of the business currently and sort of go with them, right? And you have to be responsive to the context and the capabilities of the business and blah 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 blah. So yeah, strategy is emergent in that respect. But if we're talking about like this, if this is a leadership point, strategy can't be developed by committee. And if you ask your team for ideas, number one, that's a dereliction of duty as far as I'm concerned on your part. And number two, they're not going to give you any good ideas. I guarantee you. I've been doing this for a long enough time, and I've spoken to loads of team members, done research. No one ever sits there. No one has once in 10 years sat there and given me a good idea. Not once. It doesn't work like that. And nor should they. It's not their responsibility to do that. The team are craving leadership from you, and companies are not democracies. Companies are dictatorships. And there's a reason why the great founders, who we all sort of like are aware of, you know, from your Bezos and your Jobs and your Musk and your Branson or whatever, these are all what people might call problematic characters. They're all a bit like, but they're all a bit kind of,
they walk to their own tune.
yeah, and
or they play to the.
Yes, and they're quite tyrannical, and they are very, very like clear on what they want from their businesses. This is a feature, not a bug, of good strategy. Unfortunately, a lot of like there's a certain, you could say that like the most strategic leaders, broadly speaking, they tend to be extremely disagreeable and opinionated, which is part of the reason they're able to generate strategy, because they're contrarian thinkers, and they'll push instinctively against the herd. Most people are not contrarian thinkers. Most people are not disagreeable. So if you ask your team if you try to bubble up ideas from your team in a consensus building format, what you're going to get is consensus thinking, i.e. the opposite of strategy, right? So that should just be common sense. That you need some bloody minded weirdo to say, you know what, everyone thinks such and such, but I actually think such and such, and then you draw the strategy out of that. You also then need to be incredibly sort of directional in your instructions. Like, I want you to do X. Going back to the one of the prior ones.
Behaviors, yeah.
Yeah, if you want change to happen, you need to say, I want you to change from X to Y, or something like that, you know? That won't get you that sort of binary shift. So, yeah, I strongly believe that you need to take the responsibility. The buck stops with you, and you need to channel your inner dictator and just say, look, at the end of the day, I think X, and I'm the boss, so that's what we're doing, and I will live and die by the results. That's how it's done.
Interesting. Like it a lot. The best strategy is often not the most ambitious one.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give that fact. Because, I mean, I'm a believer. If it's for your own business, you don't have to do this. But certainly, if you're advising people like I do, I sort of operate on a first do no harm principle, which is I want the worst case scenario of the advice I give to a client be that nothing happens. And that obviously then takes some things off the table. You can't have a situation where, like, you know, you say some strategy that risks all the status quo, and then it doesn't work, and then they go bust or whatever. That would be an ambitious strategy, but I don't think it's prudent. you need the strategy to be sort of incremental on top of what the business is doing already. Certainly if you're someone like me who's not actually really got skin in the game. And
Interesting.
some of the ideas that you put in the bin because they'd be too risky, yeah, maybe they'd be better. Maybe if you did them, you become a billionaire. And but should you take that risk? That's up to you. But I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, swing for the fences every time. That doesn't seem, in the real world, that I don't think that's realistic.
Alex, you survived fact and fiction. Well done.
That was good. I'm glad that you managed to throw out a couple of fictions. I was worried it was all going to be fact.
So now this is the part of the show where I typically hand over the reins to the coach. I say, do your magic, do your favorite moves, coach the mess that used to be my life and is getting more organized as we speak. I created 3 case studies. One from my personal life, a transformation in the health category that I would like to reflect on with you. And perhaps you could open your strategic thinking brain to the audience. Another one is a favorite scene of one of my favorite movies. And the third one is a fictional company. Alex, this case is about personal transformation, overcoming challenges. Listen to the case, and then let's use your strategic thinking brain to reflect on what the heck happened. So 2022, I weighed a whopping 115 kilos and was clinically obese. My confidence was shaken for sure, sandbagged by the kilos, I might say, but I was kind of holding on, hanging in there. Then came a tipping point. I developed chronic hand eczema, a debilitating disease. Every handshake, every nappy that I had to do for my children, pain. So it was pretty tough time. I think of Bratwurst fingers, I used to call them, and the German sausage fingers. And the doctors said, this is a debilitating disease, lifelong, steroid cream, go. Now, I had a suspicion. It was not just my skin, it was my gut health. And the underlying issue was kind of the way I was eating, and something wasn't agreeing with me. So I developed a vision, and this is after being overweight for about 10 years, which is where it gets interesting. Suddenly, because of this tipping point, I developed a vision. I wanted to feel good in my skin, and I wanted to regain my confidence, and I wanted to maximize the impact on my family because the weight was impacting that and the eczema. So I developed priorities. I wanted to do every bloody health assessment possible: blood, food intolerance, stool, microbiome, you name it, I did it. I tracked it, I reviewed it, I made a plan, and I executed. Now, something that was so clear and helped me throughout these years was I wanted to eat so healthy and so clean that if a gastroenterologist at the hospital was standing next to me and looked at my plate, he would, or she would, salute me. And to get there, I maintained a relentless focus on healthy food, but also kitchen operations. I have 2 children, a wife. You need to get smart about your cooking. And the last little nugget I'll leave you before we hopefully reflect on this, knowing that you're not a doctor, was I was living with my family in Düsseldorf, Germany at the time. And when we walked in, you immediately saw the steps. And this one day I was just wondering, how can I kind of motivate myself to lose weight? And I counted the steps, and there were 17 steps. And I thought, for every kilo that I lose, I want to put a kilo weight that represents a kilo. So a milk bottle, an empty milk bottle that I then filled up with water. And so in no time, there would be bottles on the stairs. People would come in and say, what's that weird thing on the stairs? And it kind of spiraled from there. I also, reflecting about it now, I'm going to stop sharing because some of the images are a bit off-putting, to say the least. Now, Alex, dear Alex, I know you're not a doctor, but I was fascinated by a book called The Fat Smoker, Strategy in the Fat Smoker. So the fat smoker knows how to quit smoking, knows how to become healthier, but one doesn't do it.
Yeah.
For me, it was 10 years before something clicked. And I thought maybe we could reflect on what happened and kind of go from there.
Well, how's the hand eczema?
As good as gone.
Amazing. So you were right. No lifelong steroid cream for you.
Yeah, I mean, a steroid cream is it helps, but it came with me. It came back as a vengeance as soon as you're off the cream, and it's not a sustainable long term strategy because it does something with you.
My
But
baby daughter's got bad eczema, and so we're going through the same journey, but on her behalf as what you went through. And yeah, they do like to tell you that, like, oh yeah, whatever, just do nothing is the approach. And I'm like, not convinced about that. But anyway, that's another thing. But I do. It's funny. I often use the example of, uh, you know, everybody knows how to lose weight, but well, not nobody does it, but like a lot of people don't do it. And it's the same thing that I've observed actually with all the strategy work as well. That like people who read my book and whatnot, like they don't suddenly start doing amazing strategy any more than a person who reads a book about losing weight starts losing tons of weight. And so it's something it's something I've been looking at a lot. You have to, I guess, you have to become the type of person who does that thing, which is much more profound than actually whatever the steps are that you're going to get through it, right?
I realized that thinking of that vision, how I wanted to feel in my skin, and that what was going on was impacting my impact in my family, which is in terms of my life and the equation of my life, the stuff before the equals is my impact on my family, right? And so this tipping point, the eczema, was kind of, I needed to change, something needed to give. And that kind of catapulted me into motion. And yeah, so that vision, I think, helped. And something also very funny, that so simple, I wanted the gastroenterologist that was annoying because nothing was right in terms of my diet. I wanted the guy to salute me at the end of the day. So that kind of guiding image, I then applied to my own nutrition, but also my family's nutrition. And yeah, do you think I had a strategy there? I mean, it's easy now reflecting backwards, but
No, I do. No, I do think you did. I mean, there's I won't bore you with the ins and outs of, obviously, like there's the strategy to lose weight versus the strategy for a business are have a crucial difference in that in one situation you are there's only a lot of similarities, but in one situation you're under competitive pressure, and in the other, so there's you have to navigate the competition. Whereas in the, like, if you've got 100 people trying to lose weight, it's not like they're only allowed to each use one technique, right? They can all use the same technique,
right.
and it's going to work. That's a little sub point. But what I would say is that I note that, like, you there are some interesting universal strategy parallels there, which are, number one is developing a high degree of agency. The fact that you didn't accept the, oh yeah, we'll just take the steroids for the rest of your life, because a lot of people would. It's that willingness to take matters into your own hand, a bit like we were talking before about with the dictatorial boss. That is, of all of the things which sort of define strategy, that is probably the absolute number one. Because you look at, again, we go back to those famous founders, it's notable that none of them studied strategy or were professional strategists, and yet somehow they managed to be, like, in terms of results, the most successful strategists ever. Why are the most successful founders in history not a bunch of ex-McKinsey consultants or whatever, right? That's an interesting question, right? And it's because the fundamental metric of strategy is not technique, it's agency. And it's sort of like an extreme bias towards positive and deliberate action. And that is not actually natural for the vast majority of people. The vast majority, people will be literally, a doctor will tell someone, you will be dead in 6 months if you don't stop doing X. And a decent proportion of people will keep on doing X, would rather keep on doing X and drop dead than stop doing X, because so low is the kind of the agency levels that people have. And you see this then with founders and chief executives and everything. The disease is pervasive. And I say this from experience because this is me as well. Like, I've had to very consciously in the last 2 years, I'm as passive as anyone else. And I've had to sort of forcibly change because I realized that this is the only real metric that matters. So yes, I do think that, like, you see in your story, that mentality just applied to a different problem. And then it doesn't surprise me that you can come up with an interesting idea for your podcast and simultaneously that sort of proactive and successful approach to your health problem, because I look at these two things and I say, well, yeah, it makes sense because they're just the same thing.
Interesting. So maybe that's back to strategic thinking, but I was fascinated by why didn't I do anything sooner? Now when you're on the other end and you feel how good you can feel in your skin and how confidence is coming back and these topics, I wonder, like, 10 years, that's a long time to be kind of not performing, not feeling good. But I think it comes back to what you said, that agency can just, that can be the spark that gets people to pick up tools, think differently.
I mean,
it's that sink or swim here.
You'll know more about this than me, and I'm on shaky ground here, but I do notice that you create this sort of like these sort of essentially kind of like you put this pressure on yourself with the stuff about your family and stuff like that. And I think that when people get pushed into a sort of high agency mindset, you have to have some real sort of like trigger of like fear that basically pushes you out of your inertia. And again, for me it was similar. Like, it was it was probably a variant of a midlife crisis or something. Like, if you don't start doing something interesting, then you're just going to have a boring shit life. It was along the lines of what I was thinking. So you probably, and then probably again, these super high agency founders, God knows what personal pathologies, what they did was driven by. It's not an entirely sort of positive thing to be sort of very driven like that. You're not like, arguably it would be better to be like, a kind of monk sitting completely at peace and not striving in any way, shape or form. But no, probably this is actually driven by some form of fear or insecurity, right?
Yeah, or agency to have to prove yourself. This could be from childhood or these things. Okay, how about the next case study? Let's have a look.
If this podcast has made you laugh, think, or question your entire life plan while loading up the dishwasher or doing a diaper, do me a favor, please subscribe. Hit that follow button on Spotify. It's free and it helps me more than you know. And yes, it means the absolute world to me. Now, real talk. I don't just want listeners, I want a community. So I want feedback, ideas, or a coach you swear by. I want to hear from you. So either hit me up in the Spotify comments section or head to www.coachmeifyoucan.show and send me a message. I'll actually read them and I'll actually reply. And if you've never done a Wheel of Life assessment, drop me a note. I'll send you one for free. Once you get your results, you can choose the category and I will find you a coach for a free get to know you session. No catch, no weird funnel, no weird PDFs, just real conversations. I want to get people coached. So yeah, go to www.coachmeifyoucan.show. Be nosy, say hi. Back to the show.
So Moneyball. I'll refresh your memory. In Moneyball, 2011, Brad Pitt plays Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, a major baseball league team with one of the smallest budgets in the entire league. After losing yet another star player to teams with more money, Beane realizes the traditional way of building a team by relying on scouts, instincts, and gut feelings isn't working anymore. He meets Peter Brand, played by Jonah Hill, a young Yale economics graduate with a radical idea. Instead of focusing on individual star players, they should focus on data, specifically stats that actually contribute to winning games, like the getting on base percentage. Now, here's a quote. It comes from a pivotal moment in the film where Peter Brand challenges the old way of thinking about baseball. People who run ball clubs think in terms of buying players. Your goal should not be to buy players. Your goal should be to buy wins. And in order to buy wins, you need to buy runs. Baseball thinking is medieval. They're asking all the wrong questions. Now, I don't know how you feel about that passage of the movie, but I've watched it and watched it again, the movie and that passage. And it's interesting because of the reframing. And in his mind, the problem isn't just a financial problem. It's probably a strategic problem. But I want to hear your thoughts about that.
It's funny because it is actually like just on a sort of like as a sports fan on a philosophical level, I hate all that data stuff. But because I'm more of the dinosaur mindset. But that's purely personal preference. The fact of the matter is that, you know, it's clearly superb strategy, again, which has all the hallmarks of gaining leverage via thinking differently, blah, blah, blah. So sports is a funny one because, again, like I was saying with the weight loss, it has a big difference with business, which is that sports is zero sum. So like you and your competitor, it's not a question of who's going to win in a battle. I hate analogies about, you know, sport or battle analogies in business because you're comparing apples and oranges with that. As you know, business is an infinite game is the term sort of people use. Whereas with sport, you are artificially constrained by having to do the similar, there's only one prize, and then you're artificially constrained by the rules of the sport, which of course don't exist in business like that, which basically they're trying to force the two teams to have to do the same thing. And then it does become a referendum, not a referendum, it becomes a contest over who is better at doing that thing. Business is the opposite, because in business, it's not about who is better at doing that thing. It's about finding the thing that only you are doing, and then whether you're better or worse is completely redundant because there is no comparison going on. In sport, it's about being better at doing the exact same thing. And so normally then obviously what you do is that then people are looking for these sort of like, it's kind of about grinding out those extra percentage points to get over the other team. And so you think to yourself in that situation, broadly speaking, I would often say, oh, well, there isn't a lot of strategy in sport because really it's not about finding there is no scope to find a wildly different path because you're so constrained. The only real scope you have is to do a little bit better than the other guy and win. And that's how most sports teams do it. What's unusual about the whole Moneyball thing is that they did actually find a strategically differentiated path, which I think in sport is incredibly unusual because of that artificial restriction that is placed on the teams. And of course, you know, it's because it's sport and everything that doesn't exist for long. And obviously I think I'm right in saying that then the whole of baseball basically then followed their lead. And so it's not like they achieved this unassailable advantage, which in business you could achieve an unassailable long-term advantage. In sport, because everyone's playing the same game, everyone can just copy. And why wouldn't they copy? It's simple. So again, that's where the analogy sort of breaks down, but it is an extraordinarily unusual in that like you're seeing an amazing strategy case study in the sporting context. So it's quite cool when now thinking back to it.
And do you see that in business as well with the focusing on the wrong metrics, the metrics that are only kind of just having your scope or your lens focused on the wrong metric?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure that would be that would be very common. The real parallel that I would draw is the way that he says, look, everybody in this sport / everybody in this industry, they think that the important thing is X. And that's what they're all trying to do. So like everybody in the detergent industry thinks the important thing is making your whites white or something like that. And maybe that is important, but we can't win by also doing that because everyone's doing that. And in his case, he's like saying, we can't win by buying the best players because we don't have the most money. That's the same thing as a business saying, we can't win by buying the most ads because we don't have enough money. So we're only going to win by actually changing the conversation, by saying that like, okay, well, everyone else is focusing on this metric. We're going to focus on this metric over here that no one else is focusing on. And we're going to get leverage through that, not necessarily because it's better than that leverage than that metric. We're just going to get leverage on it because no one else is doing it at the moment. And obviously, if the market then equalizes and everyone starts playing Moneyball, then you lose the advantage. But in the short term, while you have the advantage, you've just got to choose a different metric. And it almost goes back to what we were talking about before about how like, does the idea even need to be good? Not really. If it's different, that might actually just be enough because you're just wiggling out and creating a bit of space, and the market hasn't yet adapted to your new idea. So you've got some time to just make hay with it.
You going to watch the movie again now?
Yeah, I should do. Yeah, well, I could probably do a post about it or something.
Nice. We have enough time for another case study. Case study number 3. So in this scenario, Alex, you'll pitch a CEO. You'll listen to the case study and you'd kind of walk us through how you would pitch a potential client of yours on how you would consult them. So in this case, learning development platform Learny. You are the strategy director or you're allowed to advise the strategy director and CEO of a global learning and development platform called Learny, used by Fortune 500 companies globally for training and upskilling of employees. The platform offers leadership development, technical training, industry-specific certifications, etc., 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 through an e-learning course, 3 learning courses, and a learning app. Large companies have multi-year contracts with the platform and with Learny, but renewals are under pressure because many employees are not actively using the platform. Despite adding new courses and improving the interface, engagement levels remain low. So some of the current problems: the sales team is measured by contract renewal value rather than employee completion rates or skill improvement. Employees sign up for courses but don't really finish them, and the platform's success is measured by contract sizes rather than skills gained through courses or completion rates.
Just briefly to play devil's advocate, why do we care that people don't complete the courses if they're getting the big fat contracts?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Why do we care? But I would say, because are you creating value then? Are you actually changing people? It's back to what we said in the beginning. If your goal should be to create value, I would say a company that's selling a lot of subscriptions but isn't actually having impact with people or creating value, you might be performing financially, but it's not a sustainable way of approaching it. But then again, I'm not.
I would agree, of course. Being a bit bloody minded, I would say that like just because you're not creating value for the people in the company doesn't mean you aren't creating value for your actual customer, that is the company itself. So it's an interesting one, because you would question, if the product isn't performing, why are people buying? And what itch are they actually scratching here? Because you can debate, okay, well, look, we could just adapt the product so that the completion rates are higher and that people get more value from it at the bottom end. But I would also say, well, why exactly is this a successful enterprise if that isn't happening? What value is actually being exchanged with the buyers of the with the buyers of the of the program at the corporate level. Because what you often see, and this is sort of like the kind of fundamental process of strategy development, is that what the business thinks it's selling is not what it's actually selling. And a bigger part of strategy is just to realize what people are actually buying when they buy your thing, and then start offering that on purpose rather than accidentally. Because when you understand the real leverage that you have, and then you get on board with it, you can then double down on it and start to do sort of better with it. So to me, I would call that very interesting case study, because I would say why, I mean, maybe they don't, but based on what you said, why doesn't corporate actually care too much about completion rates? Because if they did, they wouldn't be buying it. It would be much more harmful to the business than it is. So that says to me that corporate is thinking about this in a different way. And I would say, what way is that? And then what can we do to adapt the product to go even further in that direction? And yeah, maybe like there's nothing bad. Obviously, high completion rates are probably good no matter what. You probably want to remedy that anyway. But the completion rates are clearly not the story here.
So what about low awareness levels of staff? So companies buy these programs, there's a new fancy training platform, but the actual employees don't really know that it's there.
Are we saying that is low awareness and not caring the same thing? I know that I'm asking you a question about a fictional case study here.
I mean, could be, but if you walk through this company, Learny's Canteen, let's say, and there are 1,000 people eating and munching away, and you ask them, hey, or they're at a client company, and you walk through the client company's canteen, 1,000 people eating, hey, have you heard about our new program with Learny? And nobody says, yes, we do.
Well, it comes back to the same question, which is, what is the agenda for the organization getting this in the first place? Because that agenda is then going to trickle through to how they disseminate it to the business. So, sorry.
All good.
Sorry. So it's a slightly you have basically, you've picked on purpose or by accident, you've picked an unusual type of business that has got sort of like two customer groups, which are the corporation and the employees. And the corporation is the one handing over the money. So the corporation is the one who has to receive the value. Whoever's paying the money is the one who has to receive the value. And whether or not the employees love it or hate it is in a sense secondary, because they're not the ones who are writing the check. Now, of course, logically, the company's going to be more likely to write the check if the employees are loving it. But like the level that the business is operating at is value delivered to the corporation as a whole. What happens at a lower product level, i.e. what happens with the individuals in the company, this is subservient to that. So that whatever happens with the product at an employee level has to be whatever is going to deliver that value to the corporation as a whole. And until you know what that value is, which is the fundamental financial exchange that's happening, you can't even make comment on what's happening low down in the organization, because we don't know what needs to happen down there in order to deliver value for the corporation. Now I know that being very sort of like straightforward about it, it's a learning and development thing, and so obviously the value is the upskilling of their staff, presumably. But then then we'd be in the situation where they're saying, all right, well, look, our staff are not being upskilled, so why the hell do we want to buy this thing? Now, is the solution to that just optimizing the product so that the awareness levels and engagement levels are higher, and then people get upskilled? I would say no, it's not, because this isn't the only learning and development game in town. Like, just, again, I accept that the engagement levels are an important metric, but it's important in the way of saying that, like, it's important that a car have a good crash safety test. Yes, if a car doesn't have a good crash safety test, that's a serious problem, but that's got nothing to do with strategy or why people would choose that car over another car. I don't know, unless maybe it's Volvo or something, but you get my point.
I get your point. Yeah.
So it's the completion rates are just not fundamentally actually a strategic challenge at all. That's just a sort of product ops challenge. And I would say that, yeah, you could drive at fixing that, but then I think you'd be putting the cart before the horse. The first thing you need to understand is the value exchange, the unique value exchange. And then based on that, we say, what does this mean for the product? And then if you adapt the product to that, maybe that will just solve your engagement thing, full stop. Maybe the reason that people aren't engaging with this is there's just a bloody boring, uninteresting proposition. And so if you change that, then that would all trickle through, So yeah, I think
maybe I had to think of what you said in the beginning. In theory, two customers. So shouldn't there be two value exchanges in theory? So I wonder if one would turn that upside down and say our real customers are the people in the canteen, and we want to develop our app in such a way that it equals high engagement rates. Yeah, I'm just
no. I think you can absolutely play that game. But even then, that will then be the pitch that you have to the corporate, that, like, well, the reason that you should buy our program rather than another program is that we have these uniquely high engagement rates. And the extent to which that would be successful obviously depends on what's going on, the status quo of the industry, and how you stack up against competitors and stuff like that. But yeah, in principle, as a sort of creative exercise and a way of arriving at the answer, that's completely legitimate, because ultimately we just got to chew it over and figure out what's going on. But it's going to end up in what you say in the it's going to end up with what you say to the corporates. And then what happens at the product level, that's kind of like your proof point. You remember how before I was saying about how every strategy needs an innovation attached to it? So what's happening down at the product level, that's where the innovation exists. If you're going to get these uniquely high follow-through rates, then that must mean that you have some innovation in your product which drives that, because like everybody's trying to get good completion rates. You can't just say we want good completion rates and therefore we now have good completion rates. There has to be, like we said, a thing that you're doing differently that generates that. So then when you have that thing, that's the thing where then you'll say to the company, well, look, you should buy us because we're the only ones with this thing that drives these insane completion rates. No one else has it.
I was thinking in terms of the baseball movie Moneyball. The goal shouldn't be to have renewals; it should be to have impact, and for impact, you need engagement with the tool.
Yeah. I am. Basically, I agree, because the goal of renewals is a useless goal, because that's like having a goal of, like, how much money you're going to earn, which is a byproduct of the more important things that you're doing. Now, I realize that like I'm probably like I've over-egged what is a fictional case study, and because your
yeah.
fundamental point is completely sound, and I'm just being like pedantic about it. Because obviously, because obviously, I would say that like yes, the metric that you should be measuring is determined by your strategy. So it's perfectly possible that that is completion rates because your entire strategy is built around completion rates. But if your entire strategy was built around, I don't know, cost for sake of argument, then there would be a different metric that you would be focusing on. But your general point of like the focus metric of renewals is like a bit of a red herring is sound, because it's obviously the question, just like the Moneyball thing, is what is driving the renewal in the first place.
Right. Okay. You also survived 3 case studies.
That was difficult. That was
What?
difficult.
Oh, good. I think 3 from left field using baseball terms. I think the personal one with eczema, you were like, but I'm not a doctor. Does he know I'm not a doctor? And then, yeah, the 2 other ones, the movie and now a supposedly tricky case study, but I tried to challenge you a little bit. Good. Interesting. Who is the greatest strategic thinker in your mind? If you could sit next to a great strategic thinker for a dinner for 3 hours, dead or alive, who would you choose?
I suppose that does change it, because then you want to also have a person who's like quite pleasant to be around. Because honestly, I was pretty on the verge, and it'll make everyone hate me. But you just have to look at the facts. Well, the first question, I would definitely have considered saying Elon Musk, and then everyone would hate me because everyone hates Elon Musk, and then people equate in their head, people think that I'm complimenting someone because I say that they're a great strategic thinker. This is saying someone's a great strategic thinker is like saying that somebody's like tall or short. It's just a fact, right? And it's not a value judgment. So I would say that actually for the first articulation of the question, but I don't actually think that he would be very good company. So the second articulation of the question, I would say, I mean, the name that springs to mind would be Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think that what you see, what both of those examples have in common is 2 people who have managed to achieve insane things across multiple domains, which shows that it isn't a fluke. Anyone, I say anyone, not anyone. I was going to say anyone can create $1 billion business or become top of one field. Obviously not actually true. But when you then start repeating it with a pattern, like bodybuilder, world's number 1 bodybuilder, world's number 1 movie star, the highest ranking political office possible for a foreign born person in the United States, you start to think, well, this isn't a coincidence. What's going on here? Is it? And he has a particular quality which I admire, which is the ability to set goals not based on what you want, like I want my hand eczema to go away, and if I achieve this goal, that's great, and if I don't achieve it, that sucks. That's a sort of typical kind of normal goal. But he would set goals that were so far away, so sort of like big, that in order to achieve them, he had to go on essentially a crazy adventure to get there. And the beauty of these goals is that if you don't achieve them, it doesn't matter, because you've had such a ride trying to achieve them. So if he'd actually only become like the 19th best bodybuilder in the world, let's say, he would have failed at his goal. But for a poor farm boy in the middle of nowhere in Austria, he still would have had this insane life, which none of his peers in 1950s Austria would have had. And so he still would have succeeded. And I'm a big fan of that. I think just like, a goal is a game. When you set a goal, you are setting the game that you are going to play for like the next 10 years of your life. So you might as well make it a cool game whereby succeed or fail, hey, we're going to have a good time trying. Which unfortunately isn't true of getting rid of hand eczema.
No, it's not. But it got me thinking about. I had a different conversation on the podcast about starting with the end in mind. So picturing your own funeral. What do you want family
Yeah,
members to say about you? And this is a nice positive twist as well. I mean, it plays into that, but in terms of goal setting, I see that differently. So I was thinking what my family members would say about me, what I would want them to say about me. But I think I need one of those goals as well, like really out there, and I aim at it and I go for it. And exactly as you say, at the end of the day, if you fail, but you have great stories to share over a dinner, then you're not doing too
exactly.
bad.
Exactly that.
Well, one message you would like to leave the listeners: imagine a big billboard up for grabs on the highway. All the listeners are driving in the car past this billboard on their way to work, on their way to a regular day. What would Alex Smith's message be on strategy?
I'll go back to what I said before. Get an opinion. That is the whole thing. Every single great business with high leverage can be boiled down to one single opinion, which other people would disagree with in good faith. And I can't stress that enough. And the way to test that, by the way, is um, would your competitor, however you define that, would your competitor um, uh, disagree with you? Because you hear so many people, they'll say something like, "Well, yes, my opinion is that we shouldn't rip off our customers," and I'm like, "Oh, like that isn't like." If your competitor was here, you might think maybe they do rip off their customers, but would they say to you, well, no, we actually think you should rip off your customers? No, they wouldn't. Illegitimate opinion. Like Tim Ferriss built his empire on the opinion you can work only 4 hours a week. Joe Rogan built his empire on the opinion a podcast should be 3 hours long. Brené Brown built her empire on the opinion vulnerability makes you more powerful, not less powerful. Brian Chesky, people will pay to sleep on other people's couches. All of these things that until they proved it, people would have said that's stupid. But this is like actually the foundation of every one of these businesses. So what is yours? And chances are you don't have one. Most people just don't have one, but just find one thing.
Alex Smith, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed it. Where can people find out more about you?
LinkedIn is one of the first places, obviously, but you've got to search Alex M.H. Smith, because subscribe to my newsletter, which you can find at basicarts.org/newsletter.
Thank you, Alex.
Cheers.
Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can. Coach me if you can.
Did you enjoy it?
That was good. Like I say, it was probably the most creative podcast that I've done.
Wow. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, most of them I
And
just come on and say like, "What is strategy?" As you can imagine.
good. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
You too. Let me know when the thing goes out.